Hi class, welcome back. In lesson 3, the topic is going to be on perimeter and area. And specifically, we're going to be looking at rectangles and squares today. So what is perimeter? Well, the definition of perimeter is the total distance around a figure. So if you look down below, I have an example of a rectangle and a square. So the dimensions of any rectangle, we can identify two measurements, one being the length and one being the width. And so we'll use L and W as our variables for our measurements. So one thing we do know about rectangles is that their opposite sides are equal in measurement with each other. So that means that this side that's opposite of the length is going to be congruent to it. So it's going to be the same measurement, and the same would be true with the width of the other side. So the total distance around the figure would imply that we would add together all four sides. So we've got two lengths plus two widths that we would add together. Or a more condensed way that we could write down the formula is that the perimeter is equal to 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So we can use this formula right here to find the perimeter of any rectangle. Now let's take a look at the square over here off to the side. So one thing we know about squares is that all four sides are congruent in measurement with each other. So we're going to use the variable s to represent the side length of a square. So based off of what we know about squares, all four sides are going to be the same variable, the same measurement. So we've got 4 side lengths that we're going to add together to find the perimeter. Well, another way that we can condense that down, since it's repeated addition, could be 4 times s. So this is the formula that we can use to find the perimeter of any square. Now let's take a look at some examples of some questions down below. So the length of a rectangle is 8 feet and the width is 5 feet. Find the perimeter of the rectangle. Well, let's identify our measurements first. So the length is 8 and the width is 5. So we're going to calculate the perimeter of the rectangle. So if you recall, perimeter is equal to 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So when we set up our problem, it would be 2 times 8 plus 2 times 5. So if we think about our order of operations, we're going to multiply first and then add. So 2 times 8 is 16 plus 2 times 5 is 10. So that gives us a grand total of 16 plus 10 is 26 feet. And since this is perimeter, we would just leave our answer as is for that. Now if we take a look at the next example down below, the side length of a square is 8 inches. Find the perimeter of the square. So our side length is 8. So that means that perimeter is equal to 4 times s, or that's the same thing as 4 times 8, which is equal to 32 inches. So there's a couple of examples of how we would properly calculate the perimeter of a rectangle and a square. Now let's talk a little bit about area. So what area is the number of square units a figure takes up. So let's start with this example of a rectangle that we have right here. So if we were to think about breaking up the rectangle into square chunks, then we can count up the total number of squares that we have on the inside to calculate its area. Or a shortcut of how we can do that would be to look at the row or the length of squares and count how many units across, which is 5. And then the length of a column, or the width, would be 3. So the formula that we would use to calculate the area of any rectangle would just be length times width. So in this example that we have here, length is equal to 5 and width is equal to 3. So we're just going to plug in to the formula 5 times 3, and our answer would be 15 square units. Now the way how we're going to write our answer down is we would write the unit and then we put an exponent of 2 to show that it is a square unit of measurement. So that is how we would calculate the area of any rectangle. Now if we look at the next example, we've got an example of a square. So if the side length of our square is S, or we would just count the number of blocks across, which would be 3 units. Well, if you remember, the width or the length of the column would also be 3 units as well. So to calculate the area of any square, it would just be side length times side length. Or that's the same thing as area is equal to side length raised to the second power. Because if you remember, repeated multiplication is the same thing as representing it as an exponent. Now, if I wanted to use this formula right here to calculate the area of this square, then I would just say A is equal to 3 to the second power. Well, 3 to the second power, or 3 times 3, would equal 9 square units. So there's my answer for this square example. So looking at the last problem that we have down below, the area of a square is 49 square meters. Find the perimeter of the square. So here we're told that the area is equal to 49 square meters. So what this means is that whatever the side length is of our square, that means that S times S would have to equal 49 square meters. So we got to figure out what number times itself would equal 49. Well, if you think back through your multiplication facts, the measurement that would make this problem true for the side length would be 7 meters. So this is an important measurement that we are going to use to help us find the answer to our question, which is to find the perimeter of the square. Well, to calculate the perimeter, if you remember, P is equal to 4 times the side length, or 4 times 7, which is equal to 28 meters. And there you have it. So if you have any questions about any of the examples that we worked out, please make sure that you send me a message, write a comment on the classroom page, and I'll be glad to help you out. Thank you.